Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Anderson, President and CEO of Zions Bank, and it is my honor to welcome all of you to the launch of our One Zions Power Speaker Series. I want to thank our One Zions team, especially Sui Lang Panoke, who's responsible for organizing today's event. And I want to thank our panelists who've agreed to be our featured speakers in this important conversation and to initiate our first Power Speaker Series. I want to thank you, our audience, who've chosen to zoom in and to listen and learn and lead out on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today's event is a private event exclusive to our Zions Bank and Zions Bank Corporation employees. But we've also invited a short list of community leaders and corporate partners to join us as well. So welcome everyone to the Zions world. It's my honor to host you. We have chosen to brand all of our DEI programming under the One Zions brand to strategically align with our governor's vision for One Utah. Zions Bank is a founding signer of the Utah Compact on racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we are committed to incorporating the values laid out in the compact into every aspect of how we do business. To all of our community and corporate partners joining us today, if you have not signed the Utah Compact yet, it's not too late. I encourage you to do so by going to saltlakechambers/utahcompact.com. We need all hands on deck to bring the vision of One Utah to life. And as stated in the Utah Compact, speaking on behalf of Zions Bank, we are all in. With no further ado, I'd like to turn the time over to Sui Lang Panoke, our Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, who will introduce our guests and moderate today's conversation. Again, thank you all for joining us, for building a culture of inclusion. It begins with us, it begins with you, it begins with me. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Scott, for that warm welcome. Again, my name is Sui Lang Panoke, Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for Zions Bank. And let me just start off by saying it is truly an honor to work with a leader like Scott Anderson. I've been describing Scott to my friends back east in Washington as a unicorn, because it's not every day you see a leader like me and a leader like Scott, two individuals with vastly different backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences coming together to bring a common vision to life. Now, a little bit about me, the majority of my career has been in the political and corporate arena, two sectors that are overwhelmingly dominated by white men. And as a woman of color, I know what it feels like to have white men in positions of power see me as being beneath them, or they may not even see me at all. But I have also experienced white men in positions of power who see me as their equals. And Scott Anderson is one of them. He not only sees me as an equal, he takes the time to listen. And most importantly, he has brought me into his circle of trust. Leading with equity is about building trust across differences, and this is how we build our business. There are circles that a Scott Anderson can step into and immediately gain people's trust, where they may be a little skeptical about a leader like me. There are circles that I can step into and immediately gain people's trust, where they may be a little skeptical about a leader like Scott. So bringing a Scott and a me together to lead out on a common vision is how we broaden our circle of trust. Now, these are all indicators of diversity, equity, and inclusion at its most advanced levels, and it's called equitable partnership. This is something that is absolutely possible to achieve in states like Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. It is absolutely essential to building cultures of inclusion and ultimately achieving true equality in America. Now, my hope is to see the day when I won't feel inclined to describe leaders like Scott Anderson as a unicorn, because his style of leadership will become the norm. Now, I'm going to just let all of you sit with that process, and we would love to continue that conversation in a more intimate setting. Now, it is my honor to host the launch of our One Zion's Power Speaker series. And as Scott mentioned, branding our DEI programming as One Zion's to align with the governor's vision of One Utah was very intentional and strategic. One Zion's, One Utah, One Nation. And if this were a live event, this is where we would cue music for Bob Marley's One Love. I know I'm silly. I can't help myself. But our One Zion's Power Speaker series will feature a diversity of power speakers, fostering power conversations on a wide range of DEI topics. Our goal is to generate content that is current, relevant, and expedient to our employees, our partners, and members of our community. We hope to host these quarterly and possibly monthly as our capacity to produce these events increases. So stay tuned. Now, before I introduce our guests, I want to take a moment to set the stage for today's conversation. Now, I want to highlight some key DEI elements that have been intentionally integrated into the design of today's event. First, what immediately comes to mind when you think February? First and foremost, Black History Month, Valentine's/Galentine's Day, President's Day, and the one day specifically related to our panel, the Super Bowl. Secondly, recognizing the demographics of Zions Bank, the state of Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming, having majority white populations, there is a need for more exposure to leaders of color. Thirdly, as a leader in DEI, I'm oftentimes citing the sports arena as one of the most unique spaces in our society where social, cultural, and racial barriers are being broken down every day. There are numerous lessons to be learned in the world of sports, and it's our hope to address some of those today. And lastly, there's a specific role that banks and financial institutions play in the big picture of achieving true equality in America, and that is economic inclusion. Here at Zions Bank, we champion economic inclusion by opening opportunity, increasing access, and investing our capital. And when I say capital, I mean human capital, social capital, and financial capital. Now, I know that's a lot of capital, but capital means value. And our goal is to create value for our employees, our clients, and our community. With that said, today's conversation is an investment in our social capital. Now, let's get to it. I feel confident in saying our panelists need no introduction, as many of us have gotten to know them over the years through their careers in the NFL. And I'm actually going to let each of them introduce themselves as we dive into each of their personal stories. But I will take a moment to introduce today's panel in order of retirement. We have Lorenzo Alexander, retired in 2020 after 15 years in the league, with his final seasons playing for the Buffalo Bills, number 57. We have Haloti Ngata, retired in 2019 after 13 years in the league, with the majority of those seasons playing for the Baltimore Ravens, number 92. And we have Steve Smith, proud alumni of the University of Utah, go Utes, retired in 2017 after 16 years in the league, majority of those seasons with the Carolina Panthers, number 89. So now that we have recapped what we already know, let's dive into what we don't know, their personal stories. And I just wanted to share this with the panel today. As I was organizing today's panel, the first thing that I did was I reached out to Manjanique, who's Lorenzo's wife. We've been best friends since we were like 15. And I simply asked her, "Okay, do you know if Lorenzo, Haloti, and Steve know each other? And if they do they get along?" The lesson to be learned here is that not all Black and brown people know each other, and not all NFL football players are friends. But fortunately, all three of them do know each other and have agreed to join us for today's conversation. So diving into the personal stories, and I want to start with Haloti, since you were the only one of the three of you who was actually raised here in Salt Lake City, Utah. You were born in Inglewood, California. And you went to Highline High School. There are actually several of our colleagues and community partners on the line here as well too, that either went to high school with you or are familiar with your career and have been supporting you over the years. But I would love to hear your personal story and the values and principles that have contributed to your success.
Yeah, so one of the main reasons why we moved here to Utah, we moved here when I was 6, 1990, was LDS faith. So my parents first wanted to have two older brothers that were following my cousin's footsteps and get involved in gangs. So they tried to just move them away. So they decided to move here, and we were LDS. And so we moved to Rose Park, and I was raised there, and then just played sports throughout my whole life. You just involved with all my friends in the neighborhoods, with just playing back street football to organized football to basketball, and we just played everything. And then I went to Highland High School. I moved to Sugar House. Went to Highland High School, and then played there and had an amazing career. Played rugby and football, and and then went to University of Oregon, Pac-12 up in here with Zoe and Steve Smith. But obviously Oregon's won it, past 2 years, so we kind of dominating the Pac-12 right now. I went to Oregon and started my that was basically my life.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. And Haloti, as I've just Googled you and read article after article kind of outlining your personal life and your career, what I find most compelling about your story is that you lost both of your parents prior to joining the NFL. And as I literally found myself in tears the other day reading some of the stories about that journey that you went through. And I've oftentimes asked myself, when young people lose their parents or go through loss like that, how do we make sense of that? And you spoke about your faith, and I remember reading how you had through prayer, right? You were able to kind of pick yourself back up again, and go on to lead this very successful career. And the other piece was, what your parents instilled in you up until that point of your life was enough for you to pick yourself up and to carry on. So any thoughts that you'd be willing to share around that experience?
Yeah. So learned so much from my parents, obviously from my father, hard work, discipline, sacrifice. He worked 3 to 4 jobs. My mom stayed at home. She was a loving, caring, education, community service member, very emotional. I learned a lot of things. And when my dad passed away my freshman year, when I was at Oregon, and that hit me hard because my dad was my biggest fan, and he made it to every game, home and away, when I was my freshman year at Oregon. And so to lose him, I kind of lost my way a little bit, just losing your biggest fan, and you start to question God and question the people around you. And I just lost it for a little bit, and found my way back through prayer, like you said, and just remember the things that my dad taught me, and to move on with my life, and try to make him proud. And then, as I go through Oregon, I declare for the NFL draft, and as I'm training for the combine, my mom passes away from a heart attack. And so I don't lose it as much after my father, like I did with my father, but just kind of remember them living their legacy, live their legacy through me, make them proud, try to be a big community service person like my mom, but be disciplined and hardworking like my father. So continue to live their legacy through me is kind of what I've kind of just done ever since they've passed on.
Well, I have no doubt, along with everyone else, they are still, clearly, obviously proud of you, and continue to watch you as you have inspired so many people throughout your career and in the community. So thank you so much for being here. Let's jump over to Steve Smith. And I want to say, Steve, so Steve and I went to undergrad together at the University of Utah. And I want to say that, I kind of knew you before you were big time. But, you were always big time to me, Steve. And I remember when you first came to the University of Utah, you were kind of known as like this kind of a little cocky, confident, high ego. Everyone was like, oh yeah, this guy thinks he is all of that. And then I remember going to one of the first games that I saw you play. And I was like, okay, this player's got game. He has every right to be as cocky and confident as he is. So talk to us a little bit about, you were raised in LA and then moved to a place like Utah as a young Black man. I mean, what was that like for you?
It was definitely different, and it wasn't different for it wasn't different in regards of the normal or natural response that people would think. It was different because other than one other time, I never had been out of the state of California,
Hmm.
and I never had been on an airplane except one time.
Mhm.
So my exposure to anything outside of LA was very different. However, growing up in Los Angeles, growing up in the inner city, living and going to Santa Monica Pier and seeing all that, being around Hollywood, not Hollywood as in stars, but Hollywood as in the area, that California, Los Angeles, Hollywood, LA, Crenshaw, Inglewood, they have a mixture of a lot of different races and cultures. And so I was always used to being around a lot of different cultures. I didn't have a stigma or a bad taste in my mouth versus one culture or another, because my grandparents from I believe 1950s until 2008 owned and lived in the same home. And so with that, there were a lot of types of races that were in that neighborhood that I grew up with: Hispanic, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Indian, Nigerian. So I had bumped up against, I had played with and experienced different cultures in food, in attitude, in manners. So for me, going to Utah, to some degree, it wasn't an eye-opening event. It was, the main thing was the lack of
Mhm.
the multicultures that I was so used to. Because in high school, I went to school, one of my best friends is from Ghana. And you want to talk about a full circle. Sue, I went to undergrad with you. Lorenzo grew up in Northern California, who is married to your best friend. And Lorenzo's wife was my wife's roommate. And I got to play with Haloti with the Baltimore Ravens. So to some degree, I
We're all
have
connected.
right. I've interacted and interconnected with everyone on this panel to some degree, to where it's, as we say, when we didn't have much, to where now we're speaking and have the opportunity to share. But for me, what I grew up with and how I grew up is, my folks were were hardworking, hourly wage workers who taught me that stealing is wrong, and trying to take something that doesn't belong with you to you is not the way we go. We work for what we do. We work for what we should get, and if you didn't work hard enough, you don't deserve it. And really, for me, is hard work has always been what I thrive on. My confidence is not because I believe I'm better than someone. My confidence is because I've worked for my confidence. And if confidence brushes up with someone that's not confident, I can't apologize for my hard work.
Mm.
And my hard work doesn't come with I'm better than. My hard work comes from sitting there with a God-given talent that he's given me, but also it doesn't happen by osmosis. And so that's really, for me, I've always been confident, not in my game, but confident in my work.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, Steve, I love that. Really speaking to that personal empowerment. And, it's not necessarily ego, but it's recognizing your God-given talent and putting in the work.
Yeah.
So I love that. And just one other follow-up question. You talked about just the exposure that you had since childhood to a diversity of cultures.
Mhm.
How has that benefited your life as an individual, and why is that so important for all people to experience?
I think it gives you an understanding of who people are, what they experience, and why and I'm a people watcher too as well. So knowing why and how someone may respond. And I ask a lot of broad questions. And also because of what I experienced growing up, I had a strong desire to travel and see the world. And I remember there was someone in my family that said this, you know, growing up in LA, in the inner city, riding a bus, they were always bilingual signs.
Hmm.
And I remember someone that I won't repeat said this in my family, which 10 or 15 years later played a part, is that individual said, when you're in our country, you need to speak our language.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, you know, and it was an older person. I was like, all right, whatever. So then I find myself, I'm on a trip somewhere, and we had the opportunity to stop a layover in a place that I didn't believe I would ever have the opportunity to go, which was we were on our way to Africa. On our way back, we had a layover in Paris, and I'm like, a brother from the hood ain't going to Paris, right? And so we end up stopping in Paris. And I remember saying this, does anybody speak English? And I remember that individual saying, when you're in our country, I expect you to speak our language. And I realized as an American, how big the world is. And also as an individual, how small we are.
Mm.
And how small we are is United States has such a financial strength that we don't realize how without our financial gain, there's so much bigger and so much more world out there that we can explore and really learn a lot of life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are so close-minded on what we believe someone else should be capable and competent in doing, then we lose the ability to be lovable and learn from those individuals.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. It's a lifelong learning experience, right? That exposure piece. Now I want to jump up to Lorenzo, my brother-in-law, my favorite, who was born and raised in Oakland, California, and recognizing it's Black History Month. God, so much Black history started in Oakland, California, from Angela Davis to the Black Panthers to Ryan Coogler, right? The writer and director of Black Panther, to our Vice President, Kamala Harris, coming out of Oakland, California. So something's going on in Oakland. And then we have Lorenzo Alexander coming out of Oakland, California. So tell us a little bit about what that was like growing up in a place like Oakland.
You know, much like what Steve talked about, a lot of talent, a lot of diversity. And before I get into that, you know, you mentioned Ryan Coogler. We actually went to high school together. He just produced another movie, you know, obviously Black Panther, people know about, you may know about Fruitvale Station. They actually went up in Park City at the Sundance Festival, but he just came out with a new movie called Judas and the Messiah. That actually is a story about the Black Panther Party. So if you haven't had a chance to go out and check it out, I know it's on HBO Max. Definitely check that out. It's a brother that's definitely moving. But I came up in an environment that was full of talent, full of potential, very diverse. Obviously, you know, a melting pot when we think about San Francisco, Oakland, just that whole Bay Area community. But because of some of the environmental things, a lot of that stuff didn't come to fruition. You know, growing up in the 80s, you know, the end of that crack epidemic, you know, gang violence was at a high. But fortunately, I had my Uncle Steve who stepped in and filled that void for me, you know, and that's why I'm here today. And many of these guys too played a huge role in my life as far as relationships, because my mom was a single parent, you know, trying to raise a Black boy in Oakland. And as I've kind of gone around the country, there's a lot of Oaklands around, you know, the US. And so I was able to come up because of my uncle stepping up, really pouring into me, much like Haloti's father did for him, teaching you discipline, accountability, hard work. What does it really mean to be a man, and not what, you know, our rap music or our culture is trying to tell us, and really trying to point me the way of having a strong faith. And so it was challenging, but I was kind of in a bubble because of my support system. And so I ended up going to St. Mary's High School, college high school, did well in school, and then eventually earned a scholarship to Cal Berkeley. And then from there, you know, Steve talks about being connected. I was actually a rookie when Steve was in Carolina. And so I got to meet him as a young man when I wasn't married, when I didn't know Manjanique quite yet. And when I was like 315 pounds, trying to play D tackle like Haloti. We used to actually watch Haloti in the film. We had a nickname for him. We called him Beast Man, because in college, He used to take on 3 blocks, throw cats out the way, and make the play. So I've, it's really fun for me to be on this call too and hear from these men because they've really been an inspiration to me. I've seen them countless times. Obviously, I'm friends with them as well, but it's really cool to hear from their voice and perspective. But just overall, I mean, I've had when I look back at my childhood, I had a great life. I had great family, I had great people that stepped up, even though my environment wasn't necessarily conducive to me being successful and living in Paradise Valley right now, where I am a sprinkle, much like when I go to Utah, I'm a sprinkle. When I was up in Buffalo, I was a sprinkle. But because of that background I had with my mom and my uncle and growing in the Bay Area, I know how to move with different people. And so it really doesn't matter where I'm at. I know how to talk, I know how to engage, and becoming a welcoming personality. So and that's pretty much, in a nutshell, a quick overview of my life and who I am.
I love that. I love that. So it's so important to have a support system growing up and continuing to foster that strong social network. Right, that all 4 of us have been able to do successfully for maybe 20 years or so. I'm telling my age. Now let's dive into the sports arena and recognizing the talent, right, that all of you mentioned and cultivating that talent. Diversity of talent as it pertains to sports. Now, I look at Steve and I see your skill, your talent was speed and precision, right? I look at Haloti and I see your talent was strength. And power. I look at Lorenzo's like the total package because you play defensive, offensive roles and special teams. And so you've been very flexible and adaptable to change. So I'd like to pose the question to all of you, thinking throughout your careers, college and professional, what team, think about the team dynamics, right? That diversity of talent. What was that one team that you were a part of that was the most highest performing team in your career? Let's jump to Steve.
Well, I think that's an interesting question because naturally you would think the record would indicate how well a team is going. And sometimes you can find some of the best situations, maybe from a fan's perspective. You go, well, you guys were subpar. You're barely over 500, but yet you learn so much. Football is, football, what you see on Sundays is a well-oiled machine, but there are a lot of moving parts Monday through Saturday that are good and bad. But one of the things that I do know is each year has its own habits, good and bad, and it has its own stories. And so there are times where the record may indicate that you are well-oiled machine, but I can tell you sometimes some of the worst seasons has been some of the best seasons personally for growth for myself, but also for my teammates that we've been around. That I was on the Carolina Panthers for 13 years. However, when I was in Baltimore, I experienced something different, not because it was a better organization, though it was in the way it was ran. I also experienced different business traits that I never experienced because just the way they operated. And so I really think that if you remove the season statistics, I would say the latter end of my career is really where I learned the most because one, I had grew as a man, but I also grew as a professional to know not necessarily work harder, work smarter, less harder, but I had a purpose. I had a purpose. I had a vision. I knew what I wanted. I knew how to keep people accountable, whether they liked it or not. And my perspective and my approach was totally different from the young gun that, as they say, you just roll out of bed and do it, right? But I knew there was a process in which how to accomplish or attempt to accomplish success, to where I would rather have been on the bad teams where I learned so much more than been on the good teams where I've learned nothing. and I did not cultivate strong, biblical, godly, and authentic relationships that I can win or not win a Super Bowl, but at the end, when you're in your deathbed, you always hear they're surrounded by friends and family, not surrounded by jury.
Yeah.
For me,
Oh my gosh, Steve, you really have grown as a man. I'm so impressed. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And so much of what you shared can apply to the corporate arena, right? When we're overly focused on just the bottom line results and not necessarily examining the journey or the manner in which we do business and who we may empower or hurt in the process. So thank you so much for sharing. Zoe, how about you?
I think I fall on the same line with Steve. I've been on a couple of teams that were really good going into the playoffs, but because it was more a transactional environment that I was a part of, I was like, man, when can I get out of here? I don't even feel a part of anything right now. It's time to go. And then I kind of fast forward in my years in Buffalo when Sean McDermott came in and the type of culture that he established. Just everything starting with love and relationships where we really got to know one another, creating an environment where guys could stand up, especially when we think about the last 4 years in social justice and people having different disagreements and coming from different places, right? The locker room is probably one of the most diverse areas, even though it's predominantly African-American. You got people from the South, West Coast, grew up rich, poor, white folks out of country, up Northeast. So you got a melting pot of people coming together. And so him really setting up an environment where people could get up and share and tell their life stories, much kind of like what we're doing today. And you find commonality in those stories. Mm-hmm. Somebody's, I think uncle also was diabetic. My uncle was a diabetic. And so I was like, hey man, that's something I could go and actually relate with him on and talk to him on a much deeper level outside of the game. And, our families came close, and so I think being in Buffalo really changed things. We had a team chaplain that was able to, be in meetings, come out on the field and be really part of the organization. So there was a strong faith-based essence of who we were and what we did collectively as an organization. And then there was a high emphasis on relationships. And so that was when I had my most fun. And 1 year, I think we broke a 17-year drought. 1 year we were 6-10, but that year was just as fun as when we were, I think like 13-3, because it was all about the relationship and the process of it, like what Steve was talking about, and not just focus solely on trying to get the W's when that's not really fulfilling. That's not really legacy. And as I've transitioned, that's not what you remember, right? Mm-hmm. It's the people and the relationships that you built, and being able to call up Steve or Haloti or my man Kyle Williams or whoever it may be and be, hey, what's going on? I'm in town. Can I hang out? I just went down to Tampa this week and Mike Sellers lives down there. Hey, he's like, man, stay with me. He took us out to dinner, hanging out. Those are the type of things. And so the coaches that create those environments, mm-hmm. those type of places where you can come into work and you get those type of relationships, those have been the most fun and the most fulfilling teams that I've been a part of.
Yeah. No, I'm loving how you guys are defining success in high performing teams, right? It's that connection, the friendships, and all of that. So Haloti, and you may, agree with Steve and Lorenzo on this, but I wanted to end with you because you're the one player today that has actually won a Super Bowl. And Haloti actually let me try on his Super Bowl ring one day. And I was very grateful for that. It's sitting right behind him, I'm sure, strategically for today's conversation. So what was that team for you? And then also I'd love for you to share what made the difference in that Super Bowl team that season as well.
Yeah, no, totally agree with both Steve and Lorenzo. The relationships is just amazing. Like I remember talking with guys in in the locker room, like, hey, I live in a mountain. I'm gonna retire in a mountain area. Jared Johnson, you're gonna be a fisherman in Florida. Like I have a buddy up in Montana that's gonna, like Todd Heap, who's up there. So I'm like, we're gonna be visiting each other. And so it's funny because Jared Johnson was out here last week, and I'm gonna see him in May because we want to go fishing out in Florida. He lives in Destin, so it's like,
right.
But like it's just the relationships are amazing. But the thing that's most amazing to me is how we come from all walks of life, like different areas, like these guys were saying. And to accomplish winning a Super Bowl was just amazing to me. Like, it's always been a childhood dream of mine to like win a Super Bowl, but to look around the locker room and see those group of guys, where they've come from, where I came from, and to accomplish a goal, it didn't matter, what religion you were, political backgrounds or anything. It's just, we came together and won a Super Bowl, just the ultimate thing. But to say, like, that year we did win a Super Bowl in 2012, I think the year before that Super Bowl we won, I think that was probably the best team I was on. We just had everything, and that year felt like it was the year. We lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship, and so that just left a bitter taste. But that year, it was just the whole locker room. We were just together. We knew each other. We hung out with each other. We spent time with each other. Got to know each other, like the other guys were saying, and we loved each other. It was just, we knew like who to call when we needed to get something done. We could call anybody, and it was just an amazing feeling. We had a fun year, and it just ended up short. And so I think with that happening, that off season kind of driven us to have a better year the next year. But that team the year before was just the way we were clicking in the locker room, and in the facility and outside the facility, having each other's backs. So it was just an amazing team atmosphere, and that's probably just the best team I've probably been on was the year before we won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, wow, I love that. And I love all the love that exists here in this circle. And there's nothing like being a part of a team when you just feel like it clicks. It's just this natural kind of sense of camaraderie and trust that exists there, and you can make miracles happen. Now, another question I'd like to pose to especially professional athletes is recognizing kind of two different games, right? There's your physical game as an athlete, and then your mental game as well too. I'd be curious how each of you strengthen both your physical game and your mental game. And just a little Utah side note, I got to go to a Utah Jazz game the other day, and we are #1 in the league right now. And I caught Donovan Mitchell in deep meditation minutes before the game. And I snapped a little picture of it. And I thought it was truly remarkable, and so even players like Donovan Mitchell see the value, right, in strengthening their mental game through practices like meditation and focus, taking that time for those mindful practices. And so, if it works for him, they're #1 in the league right now, there must be something to it. Another thing I just want to throw out there, here at Zions Bank, we're hosting weekly meditation sessions for our employees, right? To give people a mental break and to really incorporate that mindfulness into the work that we do is so, so important. So I'd love any of you to just kind of jump right in. How do you strengthen your physical and mental game? Steve, yeah. Oh, I think you're muted.
I actually,
There you go.
I hired a sports psychologist that actually, I was his actual first football player, but his clientele was golf players.
Okay. All about mental game.
Yeah. So for me, it was creating a routine, creating lifetime goals, creating intermediate goals, 5-year, 10-year, daily, weekly. And then one of the things that he also said, which was very interesting, is he said, when you evaluate your practice, you look at it as data, no feelings. And so I would, when I would go into practice, if I caught a pass or dropped a pass, why? And that was really it. And I always had to figure out what the why was. And I think it's actually even more interesting now is we have so much data overload, but really it's content poor. We're data rich, but content poor. Like we can get data from anywhere, but is it really tangible? Does it really help our young youth? Does it really help us that we have all this access but yeah, sometimes our kids can't even do the basics. So understanding that what I'm doing professionally or business wise, what's my why, and whatever am I doing, is this helping me get to that, or is this distracting me distracting me and taking me away from my ultimate goal for that day, which equals up to that month, which equals up to that year, which equals up to, for business, PLA is how is it performing? Is my profit gaining or losing? What's my ROI? And so that's one of the things I learned from him. And till this day, I started February. It was right after the Super Bowl, so it was like right after watching one of the Super Bowl. So it was like February 14th, 2002, and I worked with him for 8 years. And to this day is one of those things that I was able to check off everything on my lifetime goal list, not in a bragging way, but more in a organizational way of showing why are you doing this? What is the purpose of you running around in this uniform, catching a pass, right? Being angry at defenders, or what is the goal? And so that was one of the biggest things that helped me.
Well, that's so important to be able to take the emotions out of it, right? When making that decision. That's no easy thing. And there's no small.
I don't think I did it right anyway, but on the emotional part.
Well, we all know you know how to evoke a lot of emotion in your fans, amongst other people, in a good way, in a really good way. But that's no small thing, right? To be able to take emotion, because I know all three of you put your heart and soul on the field, right? Into the work in developing your bodies, your minds to really perform at their best. And so there can be emotional moments, throughout that career. But thanks so much for sharing. Zoe.
Yeah, and I think mine may even overlap to what Steve is saying a little bit, but for me, it was my development, a relationship with Christ. And so growing up, I had always believed in God, had a grandmother that took me, but I never really owned it for my own until about 2008. Like right after Sean Taylor had passed, I was on a team with him, and really started making me look at my life, my purpose, right? Why was I doing what I was doing, legacy type of things. And up until that point, it was primarily about me. How can I get some money? How can I be a household name nationally? How can I be the guy to get that sack or make that block in order to achieve a win? And it wasn't, had nothing to do with God. And so as I started to give my life to Christ and really understand who I was, the identity that I had been given, I wasn't a football player, but a child of God, and that I had a spirit of love, power, and a sound mind, that I understood that I was here to serve and push his kingdom and extend his kingdom. That's when I was able to really, for me in my career and in my relationships, really let go, because I understood that it was about serving other people. And when I had adversity, when things didn't show up right, I had a different perspective. It wasn't woe is me. It was like, how is God moving in this moment? And so that helped me out a lot, because a lot of things are out of my control. I have to be okay with that and understand that God will put me where I'm needed. Because early in my career, I was cut a couple of times, bounced around, wasn't a starter, always a bubble guy. And if you worry about things that you can't control, it becomes stressful, it becomes overwhelming. And so for me, I was able to give that to God, understand that he had put me in a place. And so even when I was in a spot where I didn't want to be, it was okay, how can I be impactful here, right? And so that really helped me out developing that. And then to I guess to Steve's point a little bit with, content rich or content poor, just really trying to center myself on the important things, right? Just who I am, the identity, and how can I be purposeful every day. And prayer was able to do that. I was able to center myself and be intentional about what God had set up for me, and take the emotions. How am I feeling? Am I sad? Am I upset? No, what does God call me to do today? And how am I going to honor his name within that? Regardless if I was injured and hurt and I really wanted to play and I was upset, okay, but how can I speak to maybe a younger guy or another teammate and help him out? I'm playing really well, but I see this guy over here, let me take time out, and speak to them. And so it no longer really became about where I was at and who I was, but more about how can I serve other people in that process, because of who God had called me to be. And I think that really helped me excel and become more impactful as I walk through my career.
Thank you, Zoe. And I personally have always seen you as a man of faith before anything else. And it's truly amazing, right? When you set your self-interests aside, how things that you have always desired, in your life just naturally come to you. Thank you so much for sharing that, your sentiments around faith. Haloti.
Yeah, totally agree with Zoe and Steve. Um, yeah, it's just for me, I think I would say like mentally, what changed for me was having a kid. Um, my oldest son was born the second year, my second, no, he was '09, so my third year in the NFL. And not realizing it now, like I was very immature, loved to play video games. You know how pro athletes love to play video games, or a lot of them do. I was into like playing video games, very immature. I guess I really wasn't, I mean, I love football, but it just wasn't my like main focus. Um, and then you have like your leaders, obviously in the locker room, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, those guys that are like kind of showing you the way, but you're not really, you're like looking at them like, I wonder why they're the way they are. And then and you kind of see the things they're doing, the way they take care of their bodies, the way they study. And then you start asking questions, and then they become your mentors. And that's when I started really growing up, is when I had my son in '09. I figured, I was like, man, like I gotta like start providing for a little kid and my family, my wife and my son now. So that totally changed my mindset. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to just throw me over the roof and playing ball? And I realized I wasn't really a good student of the game, because I would like always be falling asleep in film study. I'll be falling asleep watching my iPad. And I was like, it wasn't really like, I wasn't conditioned for it yet. And so that's what I figured I had to do. I was like, I got to condition myself, be more disciplined. I was a little just more child disciplined to do the hard work of watching the film, understanding like what Ray Lewis is seeing and why am I not seeing it, right? Like, how come he can call out this play and I can't call it out? So that's when I started like conditioning myself, watching film, and like be getting better and better, and like started conditioning almost my family too. Like when I come home, I need 2 hours. I know like, I come home when play with my kids for a little bit, then give me 2 hours because I need to watch film and get the rest. And so it's kind of like, I was childish, but then like the same time when I had my family, started having my family and I was growing, they knew and I knew that like I had to get down to business to provide for the family. So conditioning myself to be a better student of the game, taking care of my body better, mentally just understanding that and realizing that I was just very immature at a young age, and just how to grow up, basically be an adult. And I think a lot of people figured that out too late. Luckily for me, having a son helped me a lot to become an adult.
Nothing more humbling than becoming a parent, right? Truly, your life is never your own again. I want to bring up an image of Haloti. Jared, if you would mind bringing that up now, to launch the next topic of conversation. And I just want to pose the question and to our audience as well as our panel, what do you see? And let's start with Lorenzo. What do you see here in this image?
I see a group of men supporting one another, and to the kneeling aspect. Obviously, it's probably doing the national anthem. I don't know if it's before the game or how the Detroit Lions did it, but there's not one way to show your support, or to bring awareness to bigotry and racism in our country. And so I think it's great depiction of what our locker rooms look like, and that there's not a homogeneous mindset, and that I may be not willing to kneel, but I'm willing to stand next to you and put my hand on your shoulder, like I support you, brother. But for whatever reason, personally, it may be a little different. And so there's a lot of love and respect that I see coming out of this photo right here.
I love that. Thank you, Zoe. Steve, what do you see?
I mean, obviously you see men kneeling, but I think more of anything, being a teammate of Haloti and knowing his kind heart, and also Haloti is not a guy who generally takes many stance. He really voices his opinion behind closed doors. That's how he's always done things. That's how he is. And for him to, in this picture, for me, this is a Haloti Ngata that really is saying that I disagree with the way the world is. However, I do not mute or ignore that we all need support, and we all believe that whether someone likes how we are protesting or how we displaying, that I support you. And again, I know Haloti pretty well, that he's not one of those guys that makes a lot of public, announcements. And for him to do that, it really must mean something greater than himself. And so that just, just being teammates with him and having a lot of many conversations, I know that for Haloti to do this in this picture, it's not half-hearted. It's not a appease type of action. Haloti's one of those dudes, he's either all in or he's all out. And that shows that he's all in.
Wow, thank you, Steve. So Haloti, do you want to explain this image for us?
Yeah, just like the guys are saying, supporting my guys. Like, obviously, I love and support these guys in anything that we do. And especially that's just right before the national anthem. But for me, it was just different. A lot of these guys, they're fighting oppression and inequality. It's just, for me, being a first generational Tongan in my family, my parents, I feel like if I was just back in Tonga, I'll just be farming on my parents' farmland. So it's, sorry, am I breaking up? Are we good?
Oh, you froze there for a second, but you're back now.
Yeah, so it's just like, to me, coming to America just meant something to me, that it's just land of opportunity, and my parents gave that opportunity to me, and it meant something to them, very important to them to be able to come here and give us this life that I'm living now. They came here for their children to live the American dream, and so I just, to me, I thought about my parents and what they would want me to do, and so I figured they came here, love America, and the opportunity that gave them and my family, and so I just decided I had to stand and just appreciate, to me, America and what it's given to me and my family, but at the same time support my teammates and their struggles and their concerns. And so that's basically what I feel like this picture is to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Jared, for displaying the image. So Haloti, as a Tongan man, in recognizing 70% of the NFL are Black men, as a Tongan man in the NFL, do you feel like, and just in America in general, like you experience racism differently than your Black male colleagues?
No, I guess, I definitely do. I think I almost feel like a lot of times I was kind of a bridge, really, to kind of bring sometimes the guys together. I don't know if it's just me, but I felt a lot of times in locker rooms where I just kind of bring guys together. I was always like camaraderie guy. That was kind of me. But it's outside of the locker room. I don't see much racism, and I don't think it's. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm big and ugly looking, but
You're adorable.
people don't want to, confront me. But
Right? Yeah, you're a little intimidating.
Yeah, I think it's just that people just let me be. I'm just the Sasquatch in the trees that nobody wants to like ever bother. So growing up and living, thinking back in my life, I didn't go through many racist things, whether it be with community officers. And a lot of it, I think it's because I'm nice though. Like people talk to Steve. Steve will be mean, but I'm a nice guy. Um, but no, a lot of the time though, I feel like I can be a bridge.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of lived, I think. Always try to connect the two.
Yeah, no,
I feel like
yeah, no, I love that. Maybe part of it's your cultural heritage as well too. That's why I've always felt a connection to you. We share that Polynesian culture of, just loving everybody, the aloha spirit, yada yada yada. I too have oftentimes felt like a bridge, not being white, not being black, but somewhere in the middle. People feel comfortable with us, and so I love what you shared there. But recognizing, looking at American culture, right, and examining institutions in American culture that have the power to bring people together, right, as Americans. One of the first institutions I think of is the NFL. It's football, right? And I was just looking at these stats the other day. Inauguration pulled in about 33 million viewers. The State of the Union last year pulled in about 37 million viewers. The Super Bowl typically carries 100 million viewers. And so people tune in to watch this sport and to see it, back starting in 2016, an institution like that becomes so polarized and politicized to the point where it lost many of its viewers. Says something about this, and I describe it as this racial reckoning in America. Now, recognizing that all three of you responded differently based on your own personal experiences, I feel like in the height of all of that, 2016 to 2018, the one narrative that was missing in the media was the personal experiences, personal perspectives of players. So I would love it if each of you would walk us through what that decision-making process looked like for you when determining how you were going to respond to this racial reckoning happening in America. Zoe.
I mean, a lot went into it for us. I mean, I go back to 2016. It was maybe week 2 of the season, and it was, kind of on the heels of what happened at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the time, President Trump gets on and kind of draws a line in the sand in my mind, as far as players and, what the owner should do to players that speak out about social justice or decide they want to protest in a peaceful way. And I remember that night that our teams, and I know guys across the league did this, as far as having the meetings, because his remarks rubbed guys in a way that I had never seen. I didn't see him personally, but the next day guys were just talking about it. And so we had like a 2-hour meeting the night before the game on top of the meetings that we already have. And so there was a lot of dialogue, guys sharing their feelings. And again, you have guys that experience it from very different perspectives. Growing up in Oakland, it's diverse and it's more of overt or covert on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Right? But we have a lot of guys that grew up in the South, in the Mississippi's, Alabama's, where they're in a lot of ways still trying to hold on to it a lot more vigorously as far as how things used to be, as far as when I'm talking about racism and what slavery meant, Jim Crow laws. And so their experience is way different. And some of the stories that you hear that come out when they shared was like, what? It's like that down there? You just never experienced it. So for me, what went into my thought process, and because I had my grandfather served in the military as well, is that I wanted to be with my brothers and make a stand, and it was a different way. And so I ended up kneeling in 2016, and it was heartfelt, it was back and forth and talking. And luckily our owners said, we're not going to cut you or not going to do any of these things. And I think it's different from owner to owner, how they support it. And you saw that play out in the media as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up kneeling because I felt like I needed to take a stand in a way with my brothers in that. And I wasn't a guy that knelt, and I haven't knelt since then. I'm more about action and actually being out there and challenging politicians and policies and things of that nature and really being proactive. But I did feel at the time I needed to kneel with my brothers and be one of those guys, because like Haloti's point, I think I am seen as a bridge guy a lot of ways, and guy that has that's kind of moderate, right? I'm not way left, I'm not way right. And I understood that by me doing that would actually turn some people's minds that would disagree with it and see it as a divisive move, like Lorenzo's doing it. Okay, well, maybe let me at least figure out why are they kneeling? What are the issues? And I had a couple of conversations with fans that, I was, having town halls or, hey, let's meet for some coffee after that happened and let me explain to you kind of the history and why guys feel this way and some things that had taken place. And so that's kind of what went into my decision. And it was hard, it was emotional. I remember the head coach calling me the next day. He's like, are you sure you guys want to do this? Because he's worried about winning the game. I'm like, man, you got to let these guys express themselves, right? Because you don't do this in this space and you talking about love and relationship, that's going to turn everything down.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I think the reason why it was being done is because people want to be understood and want to be heard. And to Haloti's point, right? He didn't kneel, but he understood, he recognized that. And that's what most guys, and I would say the African-American population, I don't need you to feel my pain. I don't want you to go through it. I don't want you to have to endure some of the things that my kids have to endure, some of the things that are us as in this country have endured. But I at least want you to say, oh man, that is an issue. How can I support you in getting these things changed? Because we're humans first, right? We're Christians first. This is how people should be living. It's not a black, white, Polynesian thing. How should we be treated? And I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle. Like you can't even see it. And a lot of that is due to leadership, right? And who was in office and things of that nature. And hopefully that things changes. But as a leader, like Haloti's a bridge, I'm a bridge, Steve's a bridge, being able to be a leader and have great leadership to figure out how we can bring and come together and figure out real solutions to a lot of these issues. And that's kind of how I felt and kind of what went into my mind in that. So we knelt, and then we also started doing things in the community behind that to kind of carry on, whether it was serving social justice issues or talking to our organization internally to help people and educate people. Because we also have to realize, what I realized is, even though, I grew up in California, that's not our country. Our country is diverse, and Buffalo is like the sixth most segregated country in the world. And so how can I then look at a white person who's never really been around me or been anybody around me that looks like me or experienced things like me, and then judge them based on their life, right? On how they grew up. I'm be doing the same thing I feel like they may be doing to me. And so that's kind of the way I approached it and try to explain to guys to kind of get them to move in a direction of let's do this thing together and educate folks versus trying to tear things down and burn it up when that's not going to help, anybody.
Agreed. And you only know what you know, right? I mean, you only know what you're exposed to. So that is just so important. And these decisions are not made lightly. A lot of thought, prayer, other conversations with colleagues and family went into deciding how each of you were going to respond. Steve.
For me, it was a little bit different because I had retired. And so I had the opportunity to look at all 32 teams as an analyst and see the response. And so I was able, and also in a good way, able to see, but also in a bad way, I was able to see the response of people and how they received that. And one of the things that I'll say that really opened my eyes is I'll use Zion Bank as a great example. Zion Bank, if I walk into the bank and I want to get a home loan or an auto loan, and when I fill out that paperwork, it'll ask me for my name, it'll ask me for my social security number, it'll ask me for my age. But then there's something underneath that says ethnicity. And just wait and listen, and I'll say each ethnicity and just think about it. It will say Hispanic American or Latino American. It will say non-Hispanic or non-Latino. It will say other. It will also say African American. But here's the one thing it does not say. It says Caucasian. It does not say American. It says Caucasian. And why is that? What Zoe lobbed it up for me is because Caucasian is a standard for the United States. This doesn't say Caucasian American like it says all the other races of American. It says Caucasian. And so that is saying this is a standard the rest of us need to catch up or attempt to, or be where you are. And so I've noticed that, and here in North Carolina, where my kids go to private school and my foundation works in the public school sector, and yet you know what is not expressed and taught like the rest of us have been taught in history? About slavery. Because North and South Carolina was knee deep into the slavery. So they have removed that history, which I've learned in California about history, about Harriet Tubman. See, we learned about Harriet Tubman not in February, but like March.
Yeah.
We learned about the Civil War and who participated in the Civil War, not in February, but in January. And the last thing that really spoke to me is I've lived in North Carolina since 2001. But down yonder, as they say down here in the South, there's a state, SC, South Carolina. 1993 is when the state of South Carolina acknowledged on the books interracial marriages. I'll repeat that. 1993 is the time they acknowledged and recognized via law interracial marriages. So that means if you were in an interracial marriage in South Carolina, 1989, you technically were illegal. You were breaking the law. So that in itself tells you that some people may not believe and see that there's a standard or race. We want to call it racist. Here's the problem. The standard must change. The standard should not be Caucasian American. It should be like we all are American, because that's what we have to fill out on our passport. They don't ask you, are you Black American when you are asking to get a visa into another country? They just say, are you American? European, all the other nationalities. And so that, I think that is the difference that I've had the opportunity of seeing as a football player, catching footballs and running routes. Like Haloti said, is you get so involved in studying film that you get blinders. But because I work in the TV business, now I get to see. And the last thing is, I remember very much my first year in doing television, I had a producer who did not look like me. And I was asked to read something off a teleprompter. And before I can answer, my producer said, hey, do you want to read off the teleprompter or do you want to ad-lib? And this producer said to me, don't worry about it. You'll never read off the teleprompter. And I told him, I said, don't ever shortchange me. And that from there, my natural response was, I want to fumble and bumble off the teleprompter because I don't want you to limit who you think I am. And I think more than anything, if we eliminate the limiting of people based off what you believe their outer appearance or their race, then that's where the conversation stops being a conversation and we start acting out and start to remove the barriers that we don't even really know that we have really had, whether it's housing, why the master bedroom is really called the master bedroom, why the ethnicity is why it's the ethnicity on applications that has been there for years, or why a state will only recognize after every other race is recognized as married, despite what their cultural backgrounds are. They just, if they have been legally married by someone certified, then what does it matter if it's interracial or not?
Agreed. Thank you so much for bringing up so many interesting points that I would love to examine in other conversations further. Haloti, did you want to add anything else to this question?
Yeah, man, these guys talked a long time. No, no, I do. I feel,
We all know who has a lot to say here.
Yeah, no, those were great. Those were both great with Zoe and Steve. And I feel like for me in 2016, when we're trying to decide, I feel like I had such a great head coach leader and Coach Caldwell. And he brought all the leaders on the team together. We had a little meeting and just remember we just talked about it in literally 2-3 hours. And we kind of decided what we're going to do before, the games. But other than that, he was more like pushing us towards, and the way Caldwell coached us, I loved him very much. He read a lot of books, and whatever he learned, he taught us in team meetings. Like, it was just amazing. And luckily, I mean, I don't know, lucky, but like coincidentally, he was reading this book about the All Blacks, the rugby team, and I think it's called Sweeping the Sheds. And he was just always amazed on how they conducted themselves. They were a team that, very disciplined team, very cultural team, very traditional team. And so they would go to a game, play the game, but after the game, every single one of the team members are cleaning up the locker. They're picking up their own trash, they're sweeping up the locker room, putting everything back the way it was. And to him, he looked at it as like, taking care of yourself and cleaning up your own home. Like, this is our home, right? You gotta take care of yourself. You gotta take care of your teammates, your family, your teammates, your community. And so he looked at it as like, we need to get into the community of Detroit. And I'm so glad for his leadership. We not only did we during the national anthem, he gave us that choice, but he pushed us on into the community a lot. So he was, I think, Caldwell was a great leader, and I was just glad to be on that team at that time, pushing us to be in the community, see what we can do in the community. And I think that year was I just remember almost doing something every week with a different player. His plans of like what he can do in the community, and just giving back to the kids, feeding the homeless. And that was a fun year outside of the facility, just being able to be out in the community, seeing what we can do to help, and trying to bridge officers with the communities too at the same time, because we kind of brought, depending on where we were, officers with us to the community service things. And so it just was great, a great year for us as Detroit, I think. And yeah, that's just all I gotta say about that.
I love that. I love that. Community. That's ultimately what it's all about. I just want to jump to economic inclusion. And I want to integrate the Black history piece into this. Economic inclusion is not my term. It was, in fact, Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy and what he outlined in his speech called The Other America. And let me throw this at all of you. When I say Breakfast Club, what immediately comes to mind? Breakfast Club.
The movie.
The movie? Okay. Anything else?
The
radio show.
Yeah, well, Charlemagne actually has my.
Charlemagne, exactly. Okay.
So I have to say Charlemagne.
Okay. I wanted to throw this to all of you because generally when I say Breakfast Club, the white people think movie and the Black people think radio show. So Zoe and Haloti, I'm questioning your ethnicity right now. Anyways, totally joking. On the Breakfast Club, they hosted an interview with Byron Allen, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. And he was outlining a conversation he had with Coretta Scott King. And they were talking about the 4 pillars of achieving true equality here in America. Number 1, end slavery. Number 2, end Jim Crow. Number 3, achieve civil rights. And the 4th and final chapter was economic inclusion. Now, that was a dangerous game for a Black man in the 60s to play, and it ultimately led to Dr. King's demise. But here in 2021, I feel like we are ready, right, to really lead out on economic inclusion, that 4th and final chapter. Now, with that said, recognizing all 3 of you have negotiated and signed multi-million-dollar contracts, what did that decision-making process look like for you when determining who you were going to trust with your financial assets and investments, and how can we all contribute to building economic inclusion? Steve.
Oh, Haloti should go first. He complained.
Haloti.
Unmute yourself, Haloti.
1 minute response.
What are we talking? Sorry. No, I heard it, but no, Steve.
Okay, y'all are fired up. Economic inclusion.
He will answer it for all of us.
What's that?
Steve can answer it for all of us. He'll take 5 minutes.
Are we starting this, Haloti? Are we starting this right now?
You guys are fading fast. Economic inclusion. What can we do? And what does that trust factor fit in for you? Who do you trust?
Right. Well, for me, it's always been about trying to find the best guys that have great track records. A lot of time it comes from teammates or older guys that have been through some trials and tribulations, and they have a guy, and then I try to vet them out. And a lot of times, just because of the way our culture has worked, it's a white guy. You know, it's not a lot of brothers that you have to really search for one. You have to be really intentional, which is going to lead me to my point, right?
Yeah.
So typically that's the guy. Oh man, this is the guy. He's good. I vet him. It's a white man. I don't really care. He's going to take care of my money. We're good, right? But here of late, I had to challenge myself to stop being lazy and actually try to be intentional about trying to target Black businesses, right? And so that's what we really have to do, because you just naturally just kind of fall in a comfort zone and who's guy, okay? But there are some very well-to-do and very educated and very good Black business owners, Black people that deal with your money, insurance, whatever it may be, but they just don't have the same type of longevity in the game or the same type of history or connections. And so you have to really do some homework and research to really try to find them. And that's what I've been trying to do here of late in different avenues that I've been trying to pursue. But generally it's been word of mouth through somebody, and then I'll take it from there as far as vetting the guy out, as far as who I want to deal with my money, and as far as investments and stock market and things of that nature. But
I appreciate that.
yeah, and that's just, but I'm also working with a couple of other organizations of making, holding like the NFL or Cal University, for example, trying to hold their feet to the fire to also make sure that within the vendors that they're using, that you be intentional and not just go with your buddy. And that's the way that I know we're probably getting into that a little bit, but that's the way it generally works. Who's my boy? Okay, who's your boy? And then after you get all in the same friend circle, there's no diversity in it. It's normally all white men or some connection to that. And so you have to be
Agreed. So, I mean, we need to be intentional, take it to the next step in doing the research, building those connections, and also investing in developing, right? People of color in these financial industry services, all of those roles in society.
That's where the community piece comes in, right? And so it's really the way I've started to look at things as we try to attack these issues in our community, and whether it's racism, the standard, whether it's diversity, inclusion, or economic inclusion. It's obvious. Community is easy, right? Because kids want that, right? Kids, easy, everybody can get around kids. And so that's one piece of it, educating them so they know that they have an avenue or a way about making a living and being impactful in sectors outside of pro athlete and entertainer. And so getting them there. So whether it's STEM, math, engineering, technology, finances, whether it's those type of sectors, educating them there, creating that foundation. But then also the other side of it is challenging the powers that be, the people that actually going to be spending these dollars with these companies, right? And so challenging the NFL, challenging your local government official, challenging your local bank, whatever that may look like, to make sure that the diversity is created. And so you have to create the pipeline, and then also the people that are in power need to engage that pipeline so that it can grow and flourish, and then it becomes the standard, as Steve talks about.
So Zoe, it sounds like I'm hearing a possible run for public office in your future.
He's skinny. He's skinny enough now. He could do it.
That's a whole game right there.
Okay, Steve, 30-second response to this.
To me, whether it's with my money in football or my businesses that I have, I don't care what race you are. You have to be tightened and buttoned up. If you're a Black guy or a Black woman and you come in half-assed doing it because we are of color, and I'm gonna give you slack or a discount, that ain't happening. I hold everybody feet to the fire, because when I walk outside of my door, my family, the money I've made, my family says, Dad, husband, we entrust you. Don't screw this up. So I can't go over there talking about I gave it to my uncle Zoe, who are out here, not certified, and doesn't have it, but I got to give them an opportunity. So for me is whoever I go with you because you have a great plan and I can regurgitate it back to my family. It's not overcomplicated and I know what's going on. If I can't explain it to my own family, I don't do it. And that doesn't have anything with color or race. That just has to do with, the people I involve myself with is I like it to be KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And if you overcomplicate it, you're hiding something to me.
Thank you so much. I wanted to get to a couple of questions. I'm just looking at the clock right now that were submitted from our audience. This first one, now this is a long one. So I'm going to ask for like 10-second responses from all of you, but it addresses mental, physical, and financial health of NFL football players. Each year, several college football players forego remaining years of eligibility and declare for the NFL draft. Oftentimes, this is done without completing a degree. According to the NFL Players Association, the average NFL career is 3.3 years, with 78% of former players going broke within 3 years of playing, and 15% declaring bankruptcy within 12 years of playing. Beyond financial troubles, former players have shorter life expectancies, are more prone to develop a cardiovascular disease, and a variety of other physical and mental health concerns. Look at recent examples of Junior Seau, Chris Henry, Aaron Hernandez, and many more. From your perspective, what can be done to support players, particularly African Americans and Polynesians, in fulfilling their dreams of playing in the NFL, while being able to complete their college degrees, be financially stable, and have a better quality of life than their short-lived careers are now? Okay, 30-second responses. I know that's a big one,
I'll take
but it addresses a lot.
Leave early for the most part, unless you have like some outside situation where you got to take care of a kid or something like of that nature, or married. Most guys are going to be drafted higher. And normally when you're drafted higher, your career is longer than 3.3. Outside of that, the NFLPA and the NFL have numerous of services, from educating guys, allowing them to get the degree. Like, for example, I'm about to go back and get my master's. I'm gonna get 20 grand from the NFLPA. It's called the trust. Out of the trust, and also the NFL side, they also have captains that reach out to former players around the league, trying to make sure they stay connected and stay engaged. As far as mental health, what are you up to? What are you doing? And I also think some of those numbers have been skewed because the NFL has actually seen a significant boom, right? As far as you think of the salary cap. Back in the day when some of these guys played, they had to work another job. And so let's say you have to work another job. You only play 2 years in the NFL. Your nest egg isn't that big, but you've gotten caught up into this culture. And so there's been a big time shift in trying to change a lot of that. Obviously the money's better now. The education is better now. Guys are no longer have to, like when I first got in the league, we would have padded practices every single day, double days in training camp, and all the way through the season, you would have a padded practice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That has changed. It's limited practices. So there's a lot of things that have bubbled up and have been changed, and there's a new standard in the league and a lot of things. So I think a lot of those numbers will be changed if we look at them now from 2011 to 2020.
Good, that's hopeful. That's hopeful. Thank you. Anyone else? Steve?
For me, I mean, to be honest, you're talking about cardiovascular and troubles. I ain't never seen a dude that's broke that didn't have no stress on his heart. That lifestyle change, and that puts a lot of pressure on you. As far as why guys are doing it, is not having a plan of action, thinking that this lifestyle, you can win. Like a lot of people say, winning the Super Bowl is everything. Haloti won the Super Bowl. He still got lights, DirecTV, and all those other things that he did not plan for, but Haloti did. So the lack of planning sometimes happen, and a lot of that has to do with what is not available in the public school systems anymore, of learning how to balance a checkbook, understanding how investments and all that stuff. So self-education and willingness to save and not just spend. So that has to do with a little bit of, I know, not calling out anybody, but I know there's some folks in upper management and regular employees at Zion Bank who live paycheck to paycheck. That doesn't change in the NFL. If you have bad spending habits, money only makes you what you already are. If you are greedy, stingy, selfish, giver, you just are those things with money. That doesn't change it. It just reveals who you are really down to the core.
Thank you so much, Steve. 10 seconds, Haloti.
Yeah, I think a lot of abuse, with drug abuse, all that crazy stuff. It's gonna pay an effect in your after career life. And so I think that, but not only that, I also think it's. I feel like education is not the only thing. I feel like there's also trade schools that we can also get into. So I feel like people feel lost that education is probably the only thing you can do. And I kind of realized this with my second son. Like, he doesn't think the same. He's a totally different thinker. But if you put him in front of like a situation, he can deal with it. Like my other two are like so like students do everything by the book, but he can like think outside the box. And so it's like, I mean, like this kid is probably gonna be a different learner. He's gonna be probably gonna get in some type of trade school, work with animals, work with machines, work in a house, and that's what I feel like people got to stress more is not education is not the only way you can make a life in other things in trade schools and but then also the other life abuses with drugs and alcohol and that definitely grow with I think especially with athletes with hitting your brain all the time and practicing games and then you're mixing that the alcohol and stuff like that just creates crazy stuff in your brain.
Yeah, agreed. Great points. Okay, I want to jump to retirement. Jared, if you want to pull up the first slide. And I'm going to start with Zoe because I had the honor and pleasure of attending Zoe's last game of his career, home game of his 15-year career in Buffalo, New York. I have to say this image looks like the weather was just beautiful that day, which I actually remember it being terrible, cold, rainy, cloudy. And can I just say Buffalo has like the most dedicated fans like on the planet? Because I think the game was around 1 o'clock and like people were tailgating in this rainstorm, freezing, starting at like 8 a.m. in the morning. It was kind of crazy to me. But this is Zoe standing for the national anthem, and the surprise for him during retirement was, you can flip to the next slide. His daughter Zoe, his namesake, sang the national anthem. Now we were all watching from the suite above in tears. Zoe, what was going through your mind and heart in that moment?
Yeah, I was shocked. I had no clue they had it planned. So it was very emotional for me as well. And it was just so cool to see my daughter step out on that stage and kill the national anthem. You know, as a dad, you're like,
she killed it.
Kill it, don't mess up, you know, but she did her thing and showed out for the Alexander family. And so that was really cool because it was really about my kids. And that's probably the best part about playing in the NFL as long as I did. Especially in Buffalo, I was able to bring my kids up there. So I have my oldest daughter, she really wasn't into sports, but she's 25, Vanessa, and then Zoe's 12. Mason is 10 and Miles is 6. And in Buffalo, I got to bring them up to the facility all the time, eat breakfast, play in the field house. And so it was really a cool place to end because they got to be a part of it, unlike any other place I played.
It truly was. If we want to jump to Haloti. Now, Haloti, you are the king on social media and you announced your retirement on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, my first question to you is, okay, did you actually climb the mountain or did you hire a helicopter pilot to drop you off at the top?
We'll never know.
We'll never know. Okay, that is so Haloti. But what was that like for you at the top of the mountain, announcing your retirement?
You know what? One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Physically, mentally, spiritually, it step by step. It's just first couple of days. It took us 5 days to go up, but the first couple of days was, you're good. You're hiking up. You're energized. You're excited. And then those last 2 days, man, you're like quiet. Everyone's just walking, and you're just hiking up, and it just starts to get just lethargic. You're just like, oh my gosh, like when is this thing gonna end? Like, and then like the night before we get to the peak, we're sleeping, and my heart's pounding because we're high up in elevation, and I start thinking about my family and thinking about my parents and thinking about just everything. And then spiritually, what am I doing? How close am I to God? And it just challenged me just in every form that you can think of. And those last couple of steps before I got to the top it was very hard, and it took me a while and very emotional. But I was just glad to do it. I keep on telling everyone, if I didn't if I didn't retire or if I didn't make it up top, I was gonna have to hold that flag for another year and play another season because I was like, I was all ready with that flag to, announce my retirement. And so if I didn't make it up top, I was gonna be ending up playing another year. But it just was an awesome feat. I was glad I did it. I'll probably never hike another big mountain ever again. But I'm glad I did it.
You
And
could check that box.
yeah,
Check.
exactly. I can come back home to my family and give them all kisses.
Yes, yes. Well, truly amazing feat. And thank you so much for posting. And then Steve is, I mean, the crowd just loves Steve. Steve was inducted to the Hall of Fame for the Carolina Panthers. And, he shows up, there were 4 that year, show up in these blue blazers. And then Steve has this reveal. You can flip to the next slide. And here's his him standing in his number 89 Carolina Panthers jersey. What was that moment like for you, Steve? And I watched that video over and over, and even I get emotional because it seemed to be a very overwhelming and emotional moment for you as well.
The short version is, how I got to Baltimore is because of some management in Carolina, and it didn't end well. And one of the biggest things with new management with David Tepper, he was very adamant in making sure that and trying to get me to come back. And for a long time, for several months, I really didn't have any desire or want to do it. And, I'm a believer. However, I don't wear it on my sleeve and do a good enough job as Zoe or Haloti. But one of the things that I knew is I would be a poor example to my kids of holding a grudge. Mm-hmm. And so for me to be able to accept that it was less about me and it was more of being an example for my kids is I'll be a hypocrite if I kept holding on to it. So, and at the same time, everybody that knows me, I have an on and off switch. Either I'm all about it or I have no interest at all. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to do that, one, it was significant. It was our Super Bowl jersey that we lost to Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. But it was more to show to my kids that no, Dad doesn't fake anything. And so no one really knew what was going on, not even my family. So my family was on the sideline. So it was more of an example to be to my family and my kids that I have to let things go. And I just can't be one of those guys who say as I do, not what I show. And so that was one of the biggest things. And that's why I was emotional, is it was an example for me to really be authentic and practice what I preach to my children.
I love that. I love that. And speaking of, all of our children in the community, all 3 of you have set up community foundations. So I'd love for each of you to just briefly share the vision and mission of each of your foundations. Lorenzo Alexander, ACES Foundation. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it started back in 2008. As I mentioned before, a lot of great relationships, and I'm just trying to be that stopgap that my uncle was for me as far as showing me how to be a man. And we bring resources to inner city youth, low income families, from backpacks to STEM programming. And right now we're working on a program right now in South Phoenix, and so it's been really good and fruitful.
Thank you so much. And Haloti, the Haloti family, Holotenata Family Foundation. Tell us about that. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Our foundation mission is basically serving others through love and strength, and love represents my mom and strength is my dad. But we pay for classes for prep classes for SAT, ACT tests. Mm-hmm. And then we also do gang prevention. So just trying to get back to the kids and help them through education and realizing they can not be in gangs.
Yeah. There are other options. Thank you so much. Such important work. And Steve, the Steve Smith Family Foundation.
Our foundation, my mom is a survivor of domestic violence. That was not my dad. And so we help engage and support those families. And we also opened up a clinic that we serve. We serve over 6,000 patients a year free here in Charlotte. And we also give counseling. We've donated over 5,800 free hours of counseling. And then in the pandemic, we opened up a virtual academy where I hired 14 teachers assistants to help these kids that are in the public school system who are homeless. And here in Charlotte, there's 5,000 kids that they know that either don't have homes, live in an apartment, live in hotels, cars with family members. And so we've helped them, we feed them, help them with their virtual learning. And now that school is opening back up, we are transitioning to an after school program, but the after school will still focus on the same amount of kids, which are homeless kids. And one of the things about homeless kids is they also are lacking education, but they're also lacking nutrition. And I don't know, all of us know it's darn hard to focus on school if your stomach is growling.
You're hungry, yep.
So that's one of the things that we do, and that's what we've been doing and transitioning. So between the clinic and the after school program.
Thank you so much. And to thank each one of you for your participation today in today's conversation. I'm thrilled to announce that Zions Bank will be investing $5,000 into each of your foundations. As a community bank, we see investing in community as key to our success. And so thank you so much for the work that you're doing in your families, on the field, and in the community. We've truly been honored to be blessed with all of your stories and insights today. I want to thank everyone for joining us here for our launch of our One Zion's Power Speaker Series. Also wanted to announce the next one, which is going to be March 30th. We are going to feature Colonel Carol, entitled Her Story, Bravery in Leadership, an intimate conversation with Colonel Carol on March 30th. So be looking out for more information on that you will be receiving in numerous communications. And again, I just wanted to end today's conversation, reiterating the One Zion's theme. One voice, one story, one conversation can make the difference. And building a culture of inclusion begins with you. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.